10 September 11th sites that you must visit. Hello, I'm Megan Murad, a licensed New York City tour guide, and I have noticed that when guests visit, no matter where on the planet they are visiting from, the World Trade Center site is a very important site to them. So I thought that I would put together this video to help people understand the World Trade Center site, understand its history, understand how we have rebuilt, and to help them pay honor to those who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. Do remember, if you visit the World Trade Center site, many of the places that you visit are active grave sites, so you will want to be respectful. It is also a site where we have rebuilt, and it is a symbol about how New York City has risen from the ashes like a phoenix, stronger than it was before. So I hope that you learn something and discover something new during this video.
Yeah, muffin talk. Muffin talk. Muffin talks, bringing healing to those who need them most.
When I'm giving World Trade Center site tours, the tours always start here at St. Paul's Chapel. Now, St. Paul's Chapel is a chapel that dates back to 1766. It is literally older than the United States of America. So it is a little interesting that we start at a chapel instead of at what are relatively modern buildings. St. Paul's Chapel, however, has a really interesting connection to the World Trade Center site. First of all, it does date back to 1766, back when New York City itself was literally a World Trade Center. Just about a 10-minute walk from where we are right now is the South Street Seaport, where you used to have ships that would come in and out, and they would travel from all over the world, bringing amazing goods, spices, cloth, riches from all over the world, and they would come to New York before it would be shipped to any place else in the world or throughout the United States. So there is that throwback to New York City actually being a World Trade Center. Also, this little tiny chapel from 1766 is directly across the street from the World Trade Center site. So if we actually just turn around right now, you see the street, you see where two World Trade Center would have been. That's where you have that colorful street art. And then you have one World Trade Center, the building that replaced the original twin towers that were destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. So that should give you an idea of how close St. Paul's Chapel is to the original World Trade Center site. When the original twin towers came crashing down, the debris destroyed 5 other buildings, a train station, and a shopping mall. Most of the buildings around the World Trade Center site had their windows blown out. Some of them had giant pieces of metal kind of thrust into the side of the building. But this tiny chapel from 1766, directly across the street from the original World Trade Center site, survived without a single window being broken. It was as though it was held up by a string of God. So this chapel became known as the Little Chapel That Stood. Because St. Paul's Chapel was this perfectly intact building, so close to the World Trade Center site, they actually set it up as sort of a makeshift fire station. So you had all of these firefighters from all over New York City and really all over the country that came and were trying to help find survivors in the wreckage. And they would come here and they would go to St. Paul's Chapel, where they would take off their civilian clothes, they would put on their firefighting clothes, and they would go to the World Trade Center site. When they were done, they would go to St. Paul's Chapel to rest. And something that I like to point out is how on September 11th, we definitely saw the worst of humanity but we also saw the best of humanity. People from all over the world wanted to help however they could. And not everybody is able to go into burning rubble and lift heavy pieces of metal. So people would donate everything from money to supplies to blood. And then you had massage therapists from all over New York City who would actually come to St. Paul's Chapel, and they would offer foot massages to the firefighters who had just spent hours climbing on a site that was literally still on fire, trying to find survivors. Another really beautiful story is there was a teacher who saw how distraught that all of her students were after September 11th, and she said, "I wish I had a teddy bear that I could give all of my students for comfort." And people all over the world saw her plea, and they sent her teddy bears, and suddenly she had too many teddy bears. She had more teddy bears than she had students, and she said, "You know what? I think that the firefighters down at St. Paul's Chapel would really love these teddy bears." So she started to send it to them, and they loved it. They would use the teddy bears as pillows while they took a nap between shifts. And actually, to this day, if you go into St. Paul's Chapel, there is a special chapel set aside within the interior of St. Paul's Chapel that is a 9/11 memorial. And they have all different artifacts, including the teddy bears that were sent in to comfort the school children and then to the firefighters. So this is a very important site. It is absolutely free to visit, and it's a beautiful place to learn about the history of New York City and to continue to pay your respects to the victims of 9/11. The very first certified official death of 9/11 was a man named Michael Judge. Michael Judge was the chaplain to the New York Fire Department, and after the towers were hit, he came rushing to the site to pray and lead prayers, and he was killed, unfortunately, by debris when the towers collapsed. His body was brought to St. Paul's Chapel, where he was declared official victim number 1. You can go into St. Paul's Chapel. They do have historical artifacts from September 11th there. They also have lots of different events. Some of them are September 11th related. Sometimes it's about the history of New York City, because this is where George Washington, the very first president of the constitutional United States, worshipped. And sometimes the events are music concerts, just meant to uplift spirits. This is also a fully functioning Episcopal church, so as when you enter any area of worship, if you do come to visit, make sure that you are respectful of people regardless of their denomination who may be worshiping here at St. Paul's. When people think of the original World Trade Center site, they usually think just of the original Twin Towers, but there were actually 7 buildings that were part of the World Trade Center site, in addition to a train station and a shopping mall. When those Twin Towers fell down, the debris destroyed the other 5 buildings and the train station and the shopping mall underneath it. Of those original 7 buildings, we are rebuilding, or have official plans at least, to rebuild 6 of them. Many of them are completed, but number 2 World Trade Center is not. I am standing in front of number 2 World Trade Center at the moment, and you'll notice it's basically a bunch of street art. So they actually laid the foundations for number 2 World Trade Center, and then the company that was supposed to own the majority of the floors pulled out, and we've yet to find like an anchor tenant for number 2 World Trade Center. We did lay the foundations, and they decided instead of having just like ugly pipes, they would invite street artists from all over the world to come and paint uplifting messages of love and hope. So there's awesome street art here at the World Trade Center site. The Oculus is a giant train station on the World Trade Center site. A lot of people don't realize that there was actually a train station and a shopping mall on the original World Trade Center site. It was underneath the original Twin Towers. And when those Twin Towers collapsed, it also destroyed the train station and the shopping mall underneath it. The Oculus is the train station and shopping mall that replaced the original train station and shopping mall. For more information about the Oculus, I have an entire video about the Oculus. So check that out. It's definitely a September 11th site that is a must visit. The best way to learn about the events of September 11th is by visiting the National September 11th Memorial Museum. So the museum is open 7 days a week. It used to be open for free on Tuesdays because September 11th happened on a Tuesday. I believe that it is still pay what you can on Tuesday, but you will want to double check that as museums can change their policies as times progress. Before you go and visit the museum, I strongly recommend that you download the free 9/11 Museum app available on the App Store, and I believe it's also available on Google Play. I recommend this to all of my tour guests. It's a great way of giving yourself a free tour of the 9/11 Museum and understanding the artifacts even more. Before you begin, it is important to note that everybody is going to have their own experience in the museum. It is a very intense museum. When the museum opened, they originally planned for everyone to spend an average of about 2 hours in the museum. What they have discovered since the museum has opened is that some people find it just to be too intense and they have to leave relatively quickly, while other people can spend 6 or 7 hours in there and not even realize the time has passed, and soon the museum is closing for the day and telling them they have to leave. So when you go into the museum, make sure that you feel comfortable having your own experience. A lot of us tour guides say, be selfish with your experience. If you want to stay there longer, stay longer. If you are feeling too overwhelmed, that is okay. It is an intense museum, but it's also a wonderful way about learning about the events of September 11th and also how the world has changed since then. So I would definitely consider the museum a must-see 9/11 site. The best way to pay your respects to the victims of 9/11 if you are visiting the World Trade Center site is by visiting the official 9/11 Memorial. This memorial consists of 2 reflecting pools. They're giant reflecting pools that stand in the exact footprints of the original Twin Towers. And as you gaze into these reflecting pools, there are waterfalls, and you can't see where the waterfalls end. So it kind of appears like there's a perpetual sense of falling, or as though you're gazing into eternity. And around the perimeters of these reflecting pools, there are bronze plates. And carved into these bronze plates are the names of the 2,977 innocent people who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. The names are grouped according to association. So the South Pool tends to be the first responders. The North Pool, which is where the North Tower stood, tends to be the innocent civilians. And everyone, or every family that lost a family member in the 9/11 attacks, was asked, whose name do you want your loved one's name to be near? And almost every single request was honored. So as you're looking at the names, that's how it was grouped. Occasionally, you'll see a single white rose on somebody's name. That's actually placed there by the people who run the memorial. And those single white roses mean that today, or the day that you are visiting, would have been that person's birthday. I do always remind guests that this is an active grave site. So when you come to visit, the person that you might be standing next to might be there mourning a loved one, mourning a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a husband, a wife, a best friend. So do treat it the way that you would treat an active grave site. In general, happy, smiley selfies are frowned on, although you are allowed to take photographs. You'll also see that a lot of the names are decorated with different tokens, flowers, flags. Sometimes the names even have chocolates on them. Those are placed there by people who are coming here to mourn their loved one. It is a beautiful place of reflection. The official name of the memorial is Reflecting Absence. So do treat it with respect. In the middle of the 9/11 memorial, there is a tree that's a little bit different than every other tree at the 9/11 memorial. The tree is a calorie pear tree, and it's known as the survivor tree. The legend is that this tree was actually found in the rubble of the 9/11 attacks. It was found by firefighters and it was very destroyed. It was basically just a stump of a tree, but it was alive. So the firefighters dug it up by the roots. They put it in a nursery in the Bronx where they nursed it back to health. There's then a legend that it was struck by lightning and it survived that as well. It was then replanted here at the 9/11 memorial just before Hurricane Sandy, and it survived all of these events and it continues to grow. And it stands here as a symbol about how when we endure tragedy, some things will always be broken and some things will always be scarred. But through it all, we can continue not just to survive, but to grow and to thrive and to be stronger than we were before. In addition to the main 9/11 memorial, there are several sort of hidden, perhaps lesser known memorials around the World Trade Center site. And this is one of them. So this is the Firefighter Memorial. It commemorates the 343 firefighters who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. And the top sort of portrays images of firefighters during September 11th attempting to rescue people. Here they are with their fire hose. Here is a depiction of the original Twin Towers after being hit. And underneath the sort of mural, you'll start to see all of the names of the 343 firefighters who lost their lives in the September 11th attacks. And these are grouped alphabetically as well. So if you want to pay your respects to the 343 firefighters who lost their lives, right here, this firefighter memorial is the place to do that. Also of note, it is attached to a firehouse. It is Firehouse 10. Firehouse 10 was here on September 11th. They were literally the first responders to the World Trade Center site after the September 11th attacks. Another must-see September 11th site here in New York City is this little park that I'm in right now. It's known as Liberty Park. It's an elevated park and it's full of monuments and memorials. There's even a Greek Orthodox church, St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, which is currently being rebuilt after the original one was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. One of my favorite works of art here at Liberty Park is this sort of mangled looking globe behind me. It's a work of art known as the Sphere, and it actually used to stand between the original Twin Towers of the original World Trade Center complex. And it looked a little different. It was actually a very smooth sphere, and it was supposed to be a very abstract atlas holding the world on his shoulders. When those original Twin Towers came crumbling down, the debris destroyed all of the World Trade Center site buildings, the train station and the shopping mall underneath it. It damaged the other buildings around the World Trade Center site. But this sphere actually survived. It was damaged. If you look at the top, it looks like someone got very angry and punched a hole in the top of it. That's where debris fell on the sphere, but it did survive. So New Yorkers asked the artist Fritz Koenig if he would fix it. And he said, "I'm not going to fix it right now because it's taken on this new kind of beauty and a new meaning that I never could have imagined working on it in my workshop. But let's place it back at the World Trade Center site and I will fix it, but I will only fix it when the world is at peace." And for now, it will stand here as a memorial to peace. So I always like to say, let's work really hard to get the sphere fixed. Unfortunately, Fritz Koenig very recently passed away, but I still want to strive for this world peace so we can see the sphere fixed in spirit. Something that is so brilliant about the new World Trade Center site is how all of the buildings are constantly relating to one another. It's almost as though they're having a conversation. And a beautiful example of this is seen, it's basically just across the street going south from the 9/11 Memorial. I'm here at a park known as Liberty Park. And from Liberty Park, you can see number 4 World Trade Center, the new number 4 World Trade Center, really well. And if you look behind me, you'll see 4 World Trade Center and you'll see 1 World Trade Center. And what do you see reflected into 4 World Trade Center? You see 1 World Trade Center. So it actually looks like we have twin towers again. It's a beautiful example of how all of these buildings are constantly relating to one another. A must-see World Trade Center site is One World Observatory. One World Observatory is the observation deck on top of One World Trade Center. It's on the 100th, 101st, and 102nd floors of One World Trade Center. So One World Trade Center is behind me right now. This is the building that replaced the original twin towers of the original World Trade Center site that were destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. They rebuilt One World Trade Center, and if you want to visit and know more about One World Observatory, I have an entire video where I take you on a tour of One World Observatory. So One World Trade Center, I want to talk a little bit about this building because it's a really neat building. If you look at the top of the part that looks like a building, that is the same exact height as the original North Tower. The South Tower was a little bit shorter than the North Towers. They weren't like perfectly twins. If you look up at the top, you'll see a metal bar along the very tippy top of the building part of that building. The South Tower would have come up to the bottom part of that silver bar. So that's a memory of the original Twin Towers built into the new building. And then the very tippy top of the building is technically a spire. That spire is 1,776 feet tall. That stands for the year 1776. And what happened on the 4th of July, 1776? We signed our Declaration of Independence. So the height of One World Trade Center stands for U.S. freedom or U.S. independence. Across the street to the west from the 9/11 Memorial, you will find the Winter Garden Atrium, also known as Brookfield Place. Similar to the Oculus, this is a shopping mall, and it also has office buildings surrounding it. In the 9/11 attacks, this building was standing here and was very badly damaged. If you look up, you will notice that there's this beautiful glass ceiling. That beautiful glass ceiling was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. They have since fixed it. They have rebuilt. This location is another example of how New York City has risen like a phoenix and become stronger than we were before. If you visit Brookfield Place or the Winter Garden Atrium, you can also get this really unique view where you are standing on the second level and you look out and you actually get to see above the north pool of the 9/11 Memorial. You get a beautiful view of the Oculus, the train station and shopping mall that replaced the original train station and shopping mall that was destroyed in the 9/11 attacks. And from here it really looks like it's bird wings or like a phoenix rising from the ashes. You also get to see the 9/11 Museum, and then you also get to see the base of One World Trade Center. If there is inclement weather when you come to visit, this is a great way of basically taking in the entire World Trade Center site and never going outside. It's also just a really beautiful view and a place to sit and reflect. One of the lesser known 9/11 memorials here in Lower Manhattan is known as the 11 Tears Memorial. It is located in the World Financial Center in the American Express building on the ground floor lobby. And it commemorates the 11 American Express employees who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks. This is one of the most beautiful 9/11 memorials, and it's just so well thought out. What it consists of is an 11-sided pool with the names of the 11 American Express employees who lost their lives that day etched into it. Suspended above the pool is an 11-sided quartz. It is suspended by 11 wires, and consistently from the ceiling, there are dropping 11 tears into the pool. A feature that, at least for me, really sets this memorial apart is that it actually really lets you get to know the individuals that the names belong to. So for example, if you look, you'll see Loretta Ann Vero, and her family and loved ones were able to pick 5 words or phrases that they believed represented her. So here we have sincere, thoughtful, trustworthy, loving and loyal, respected and loved. One of the names that my fellow tour guides and I really love, and I apologize if I mispronounce it, is Sigrid Wisway. And you will see that the 5 phrases chosen here are loyal, beautiful, thoughtful, determined, loved family, adored cats. So for me, this memorial allows me to get to know a little bit about these 11 American Express employees. I think that this memorial is a beautiful place to come and reflect. I always tell guests visiting the World Trade Center site to end their visit with a trip to O'Hara's. O'Hara's is a pub. You can get drinks here. They also have amazing cheeseburgers. This is a favorite watering hole of Firehouse 10. When 9/11 happened, this building was damaged, and they also very sadly lost a lot of their regulars, which were the firefighters at Firehouse 10. When O'Hara's reopened, they reopened with the intent of paving over bad memories with good spirits. There's a pun there. And they were very successful with this. Now the legend is that when they first opened, they invited first responders to their grand reopening. And one of the first responders ripped the patch off of his uniform and stapled it onto the wall. And since then, thousands of first responders from all over the world have followed suit. So if you come to visit O'Hara's, look at these patches. See if you can find a patch from your hometown. And it's a wonderful way to come and memorialize and honor and support and celebrate first responders. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned something. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit subscribe so you never miss a New York moment.